Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission, as always, is to take a whole stack of sources, could be research papers, online trends, or, like today, some really detailed prophetic accounts, and basically pull out the main thread, the core story, so you can get what's being claimed and, why.
Yeah, and this time we're diving into something pretty fascinating, prophetic convergence. The sources we're looking at today are very specific. They're popping up across social media, people sharing visions, dream interpretations, and some really complex calendar math.
And our focus today is pretty tight, but it's dense. We're trying to figure out why this, well, seemingly independent group of sources have all landed on the exact same date for a huge event. We're talking the rapture or maybe the start of the tribulation.
Focused specifically on November 7th, 2025.
Exactly. So our job is to unpack that, objectively lay out the biblical links, the numerology, the calendar stuff they use to pinpoint this specific date.
It's quite a case study, actually, because you got different methods. Someone had a dream, someone else is using gematria, another person's deep into calendar studies.
And they all point to the same window.
Right.
Okay, let's jump in. The core date, November 7th, 2025. Where on earth does that specific date come from?
It seems to stem from a particular vision reported around October 17th. Someone described seeing this figure. They called him an angel because he was huge, like 3 times their size.
Wow, okay.
And this figure apparently shouted just one thing. The tribulation begins on November 7th.
That's dramatic, a very direct starting point. But the sources didn't just leave it there, did they? They immediately tried to connect it to the Hebrew calendar.
They did. The person who had the dream, or others analyzing it, looked up November 7th on the Hebrew calendar and found it lines up with the 15th day of the 8th month.
The 15th of the 8th month. Okay, why is that significant for them?
Well, according to these sources, it's significant in a, let's say, negative way. They link it directly back to Jeroboam, the first king of the northern kingdom of Israel.
Jeroboam, remind us, why is his calendar choice relevant here? He split the kingdom, right?
Exactly. After Solomon, he led the northern tribes away. And to stop people going back to Jerusalem to worship, he set up his own religious system. Golden calves, different locations.
And part of that was changing the feast dates.
Precisely. God ordained the Feast of Tabernacles for the 15th day of the 7th month. But Jeroboam, to consolidate his control, just declared it would be celebrated a month later on the 15th day of the 8th month.
So the sources see that 8th month date as fundamentally illegitimate, man-made, not God-ordained.
That's the interpretation. They argue because Jeroboam arbitrarily invented this date, it's now marked, almost destined to be a day of judgment or negative significance.
Interesting. Taking a historical deviation and giving it prophetic weight. Okay, so that's the Jeroboam link. But then they bring in a huge biblical parallel, Noah's flood.
Yes, the flood narrative is absolutely central here. It's the main metaphor tying a lot of this together. Genesis 7.11 clearly states the flood began on the 17th day of the 2nd month.
Which is Sheshvan, or Heshvan.
Right, Heshvan 17th. Now, even though the initial dream mentioned the 15th, other sources analyzing this refine it. They say the event really kicks off around Heshvan's 16th or 17th, which lines up perfectly with the original flood start date.
So November 7th gets them in the ballpark, and then Heshvan 17 connects it directly to the flood pattern.
Correct. It signals the beginning of the cataclysm, just like the flood.
Okay, this seems like a good point to get into the numerology they use, the 117 code they call it. This is where it starts getting intricate.
The 117 code is presented as sort of the mathematical proof. It starts with that flood date again, the 17th day of the, well, some say first month, some say second, depending on calendar interpretation. But the key numbers are 1 and 17.
Giving you 117 or 117.
Exactly. And they argue this number 117 isn't random. It's like a divine marker appearing at key points.
Okay, so how do they trace this divine marker through the Bible to back up the November 7th timing? Walk us through their examples, because they are quite specific.
They usually highlight 4 main ones. First, naturally, Genesis 7, verse 11, the original flood date reference.
Okay, 7:11 gives 117 if you read it that way, sort of.
Well, 7 and 11 are the components, yes. The second one is maybe easier to remember, Psalm 117. They make a big deal that this is the exact middle chapter of the Protestant Bible.
The middle chapter, interesting, like a central signpost.
That's the idea. Then third, they jump to the New Testament, Revelation chapter 11, verse 7.
Revelation 11.7, what happens there?
That's when the beast comes up from the abyss and overcomes the 2 witnesses. A major turning point in that prophecy.
So another critical moment marked by 11 and 7, and the fourth.
The fourth is a bit different. They count the total number of chapters in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, plus the book of Acts in the Greek New Testament,
And that total is?
117 chapters.
Huh. So, flood date, middle of the Bible, end of the witnesses, total Gospel Acts chapters. They're seeing 117 everywhere.
Pretty much. They argue this repeated pattern, derived from the flood, confirms the timing isn't accidental.
That's quite a weaving together of disparate texts based on numbers. Okay, moving on from the date itself. The sources also talk about a specific warning period, right? Like a 7-day countdown, again, linking back to Noah.
Yes, absolutely. The logic is if this event parallels the flood lifting Noah's Ark, then there has to be that period where people get into the ark before the door shuts and the event begins.
Genesis 7 mentions that Noah was in the ark for 7 days before the rain started.
Correct. Genesis 7.110. So the interpretation is that believers are, in a sense, already in the ark starting around November 1st, 2025. They linked to November 1st to Heshvan 10, the day Noah actually entered the ark.
So November 1st kicks off this final 7 more days warning period, leading right up to the November 7th event.
That's the timeline they propose.
Now, if November 1st is the start of that crucial 7-day warning, they must have identified some real-world event happening around then that triggered the countdown. What was the sign?
This is where they bring in contemporary events. They pointed very specifically to the opening ceremony for the new Grand Egyptian Museum, the GEM, which took place around November 1st or 2nd.
A museum opening. How does that become a prophetic sign?
They saw it as this huge, globally significant event, packed with symbolism they interpret as, well, ominous or occult. They saw it as the starting gun for the final 7 days.
Okay, what kind of symbolism are we talking about? What did they flag in that ceremony?
Quite a few things. They mentioned lots of pyramid imagery, obviously, on the stage, even on ceremonial staffs people were holding. They also noted the number of international delegations present, 79 apparently.
79 delegations. Why 79?
They connect that number 79 to Revelation 13.7, which talks about the Antichrist having authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. It's seen as representing global submission.
Okay, that's a specific interpretation. But what was the core message or language used at the event that really sealed it for them?
It seems to be the language used. The sources claim there was a lot of talk about peace and safety during the event, in the speeches and promotional materials.
Peace and safety. That phrase is a major flag in prophecy circles, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It comes from 1 Thessalonians 5, which warns that when people are saying peace and safety, sudden destruction will come upon them, like labor pains. So for these sources, hearing that phrase used prominently was like a direct quote from the end times script.
And the visual elements, you mentioned symbolism. Was there anything specific linking it to the Noah rapture theme?
Yes, the most direct visual link they point to is the solar bark imagery used in the ceremony. You know, the boat the ancient Egyptian sun god Ra supposedly used.
Right.
They interpret that as a direct parallel to Noah's Ark being lifted up by the floodwaters. So the GM ceremony, in their view, wasn't just a warning. It visually telegraphed how the event would happen, the lifting of the ark, the rapture. It was seen as a welcome party for the Antichrist that also signaled the imminent departure of the faithful.
Okay, that connects the dots on the warning sign. Now let's get into the third section, finding the exact moment of the snatch-up. This involves, I gather, some really specific code interpretation using Strong's Concordance and a Swahili clock.
Yeah, this is where it gets highly technical with linguistic codes. Several sources mention dreams featuring a clock showing the time 1:26 a.m.
1.26 in the morning. Okay, seems random. How did they get from 1:26 a.m. to a significant time? What's this Swahili upside-down clock thing?
Okay, so the explanation given is that in some cultures, including Swahili culture traditionally, timekeeping starts at sunrise, around 6 a.m. So 7 a.m. is the first hour, 8 a.m. the second, and so on.
Ah, so it creates a fixed offset from the standard 24-hour clock.
Exactly, usually a 6-hour difference. So using this method, they call it the upside-down clock because it flips the reference point, and also factoring in daylight saving time shifts that happen around November.
Right, clock's changing.
They convert that dream time of 1:26 a.m. into 7:26 p.m.
7:26 p.m. And why is that time the crucial one?
Strong's Concordance. The number 726 in Strong's Greek dictionary corresponds to the word harpazo.
Harpazo. What does that mean?
It means to seize, to snatch, to catch away, often suddenly and forcefully.
And that connects directly to
1 Thessalonians 4.17, the key rapture verse. It says believers will be caught up. The Greek word used there is harpazo, to meet the Lord in the air.
So 1:26 a.m. in a dream becomes 7:26 p.m. via a cultural clock conversion, and 7:26 is the Strong's number for harpazo, the catching up word.
Precisely. That's how they pinpoint 7:26 p.m. as the designated moment for the rapture.
Wow, that's layers upon layers of interpretation. Okay, let's look at the broader calendar picture they paint. The claim is that these events in late 2025 also fulfill the last three Jewish feasts that haven't yet been prophetically fulfilled.
That's a big part of the argument, yes. Jewish tradition outlines 7 main feasts. The first 4, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, and Pentecost, are generally seen by Christians as fulfilled by Jesus' first coming.
His death, resurrection, and the coming of the Holy Spirit.
Right. But the last 3, the fall feasts, are seen as pointing towards the second coming events.
And those are
The Feast of Trumpets, or Yom Teruah, seen as the wake-up call or resurrection signal. Then the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, judgment and repentance. And finally, the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot, a time of rejoicing, looking forward to God dwelling with his people, often linked to the millennial reign.
So the sources argue that the sequence of events around November 2025 on what they call God's heavenly calendar perfectly maps onto the fulfillment of these three final feasts.
Yes, that the trumpet call, the separation atonement, and the beginning of dwelling with God align with this time frame.
And the final piece of complex math they bring in is this 666 correlation. This sounds like the ultimate confirmation for them. What period does this number supposedly span?
This calculation connects 2 specific dates. They identify January 11th, 2024 as some kind of significant celestial or symmetrical event marker. They often refer to it using 11.11 symbolism.
Okay, January 11th, 2024.
And then they calculate the number of days between that date and the prophetic flood date they've identified, November 7th, 2025, or Heshvan 17.
And the duration between those two dates is?
According to their calculations, it comes out to exactly 666 days.
666. The number associated with the beast, the Antichrist. They're using that number as proof for the timing of the rapture.
It's presented as confirmation. The argument seems to be that this number, marking the period leading up to the event, signifies the end times context, proving the date is tied into the final prophetic battle and therefore must be correct. It's like an enemy signpost confirming God's timeline.
That's a bold claim. Given how much relies on precise dates and calculations, it makes sense they'd also address issues with calendars themselves. They seem worried about timekeeping being unreliable.
They definitely express concern about that. They mention things like the Mandela effect, where large groups misremember historical facts as potential evidence that timelines are being subtly altered.
Like reality itself is shifting.
Something like that. They also point to specific discrepancies they find on, say, astronomical websites, like moongiant.com, where maybe a full moon date seems to shift by a day compared to other calculations or expectations.
So if earthly calendars and even online trackers are unreliable, what do they trust?
The moon. They fall back on Genesis 1 and Psalm 104, which describe the sun, moon, and stars being created for signs, seasons, days, and years. They call the moon God's faithful witness in the sky. That's their ultimate calendar.
Relying solely on direct lunar observation or calculation based on it. Okay. We've covered the date, the codes, the warnings, the math. Let's finish with the vision itself. What do the sources say the actual rapture or harvest event looks like?
One source, Crease Gaming 2819, seems to provide details.
Yes, that source offers a very vivid picture. It describes millions of angels arriving, incredibly bright, lighting up the whole earth. God himself is described as a light even brighter than the sun, too bright to look at directly.
And leading them.
Michael the Archangel is prominent, holding what's described as a cross sword. And the actual catching up process, is it indiscriminate?
No, it's described as highly selective. The angels physically come down to earth, and they know exactly who to grab. The vision strongly emphasizes children, teenagers, young adults described as the pure or maybe newly faithful. Some older people too, but the focus is on the young.
And those left behind.
Often depicted as kneeling, maybe in shock or sudden realization. Described sometimes as those who mocked or refused to believe.
And what happens on Earth immediately as this separation takes place?
A massive earthquake starts almost instantly. It's described as a violent shaking, a warning. Then, as Michael raises his sword, flanked by 2 other powerful angels, the destruction escalates. Cities crumble, buildings fall.
And this destruction has a purpose.
The vision interprets it as the earth beginning to reset, to return to a more natural state, its former glory. Plants and nature start reclaiming the land as human structures break down.
And where do the saved go? What's the destination?
They're taken to what's called the kingdom of light. It's described as a place for settling in, resting, reuniting with loved ones who died previously. Interestingly, the vision also mentions that some who are taken are still question themselves, which suggests maybe a continuing process of understanding or judgment, even for those who are saved.
Okay, pulling all this together, it's undeniable that these sources, while varied, have constructed an incredibly intricate narrative. It's not just a date pulled out of a hat.
Not at all. It's a complex tapestry, weaving together that initial dream vision, Jeroboam's historical calendar change, the detailed mechanics of the Noah story, all supposedly validated by layers of numerology, the 117 code, the 666-day count, and then linked to a contemporary event like the GM opening.
The internal consistency is really striking. Whether you accept the premises or not, you can see how the pieces fit together in their logic. The Noah analogy is the backbone. The 7-day warning provides structure. The time codes like 7.26 p.m. Harpazo add that layer of extreme precision.
Exactly. That cohesion gives the narrative its strength for those who follow it. The fact that different people, using different methods, apparently arrived at the same narrow time frame makes it compelling for them.
That's something to think about.